everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another GovCast episode. Today, I'm joined by Mike Cleary, who is the Director of Technical Training and an instructor at Automotive Technical Support Services. He is also an ASE Master Technician, a former 8-time Ford Certified Senior Master Technician, in addition to many other accolades. He's also a writer for us and a speaker at GFX. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I consider it a privilege.
Well, we have a few things to talk about today, and
Sure.
this is why we brought you on to talk technicians and fleet and get into the weeds a little bit about that. So what I wanted to ask you first was, from your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen, and how does the industry for technicians look now?
Well, the biggest challenges I see right now are the evolving technology and all the vehicle platforms, even all the way up to heavy truck. But, when I started, I was a points and condenser guy. Things were pretty simple. If a vehicle wasn't running, we didn't call it drivability back then. I mean, if a vehicle wasn't running properly, you just did a tune-up on it, changed the points, condenser, spark plug, maybe adjusted the carburetor, and then away you went. And now it's not even that simple anymore. Carburetors are gone, points and condensers are gone. We have all sorts of high-tech stuff on the vehicles, lots of electricity and electronics items on the vehicles, and the challenge is basically keeping up with all that stuff because it's evolving every year.
Well, when it comes to those challenges, especially facing government fleets, how can fleets approach those to better succeed down the line?
Well, I think part of it is keeping their, and this is going to sound self-serving, but I'm going to say it anyway. You know me, I was a technician for 40 some years. And, my last stop was I owned my own place while I was doing the training, and then I sold it. The best way for them to do it is training, and it doesn't have to be my training, and it doesn't even have to be in-person training. There's plenty of really great online opportunities out there. But, I remember years ago, I was at a General Motors training center up near Oakland, California, and we had a great instructor. And I remember even back then in the 1980s when electronic ignition was coming in, although it came in before 1980, we had feedback carburetors coming in. I always remember the instructor telling us, look, you guys, this stuff is not going away. As long as you stay up with it and keep trained, you'll always have a job. And that stuck with me. From a fleet perspective, just keeping the guys trained, updated, motivated, which is part of the challenge. That's not a fleet issue. That's an industry-wide issue. Just keeping them up to speed on everything that's coming in.
So one of the challenges and changes that we've seen, and I know that you're well aware of, what's going on. So we've got hybrids now, we've got EVs, and it's a reality for most fleets. When it comes to those new vehicles, how do operations prepare to service those vehicles, and what do they need to know in relation to that?
Well, on the hybrid and EVs, I kind of simplify things. One of the best compliments I ever got from a fleet director was, the reason we hire you is because you simplify things and put it in plain English. When I worked on a hybrid or EV, and I still do occasionally for consults, yes, it's high voltage, but if you have a really great understanding of electricity and electronics, it's not a huge departure from working on any other automotive platform other than the electronic sophistication and the high voltages. What I would recommend they do is, you could go to a generic hybrid or electric vehicle class, but when I started doing hybrid and EV training, I started doing manufacturer-specific training because I knew the fleets were going to have their own manufacturer-specific vehicles. And so, yes, there is generic hybrid stuff. A DC to DC converter kind of operates the same on all vehicles, whether it be Ford, General Motors, Toyota. But there are idiosyncrasies built in, I think I pronounced that correctly, that are manufacturer specific. So I would recommend, if they're transitioning over to hybrid and EV, that they stay focused on the actual manufacturer who they're purchasing the vehicle from.
Well, when it comes to another challenge a lot of fleets are facing, and that's recruiting techs. So, when it comes to recruiting techs in what is a very evolving industry, as you know, what should fleets consider and what do they need to know when it comes to bringing in that talent and keeping it as well?
I think this is a generational thing, and now I sound like my dad. Um, I think it's a generational thing. When I was working as a tech for somebody else, even when I started out young, I started working at a gas station in Los Angeles, and you know, they didn't have a lot of benefit packages, things of that nature back then. This was in the 1970s and then the 80s. Um, our generation just basically looked at it for the money. I mean, we worked holidays, we had Christmas off, but I look back on my career then and I look at some of the guys I worked for and it's like, there's no way I'd put up with this again. But I didn't know any better. And now the younger technicians, and everybody's younger than I am, they're looking at it for, yes, they're looking at it for pay, but they're looking at it for benefits. They're looking at it for uh, rewards. They want to be acknowledged. I mean, my short-sighted opinion was I didn't care about all that. I just, it was a show me the money thing. But I didn't have a really good benefit package at any employer I worked for until the very end of my career, and that was at a Ford dealership. And that was my last stop as an employee. And then I opened my own shop. So things are a little bit different now. So the fleets, it's not just about the pay. At least that's what I'm seeing in the younger generation. They want to be recognized. They don't want to be bored, which, most of the fleets that I've done training for, and I haven't been in every single fleet, obviously, but their guys are pretty much well-rounded. I would look for guys if I was running a fleet operation, and to be fair, I've never run a fleet operation, but when I opened my own shop, I wanted guys that were motivated. They could answer the question if I asked them, why do you want to work here? Why do you want this job? Why do you want to pursue a career in automotive or stay in a career in automotive? What's your motivation for even getting into this career? Um, you have to have this is my opinion, of course, but you have to have a passion for working on vehicles. That was my thing. I didn't, yeah, I'm sitting here telling you, yeah, it was all about the money, but you have to have a passion for working on vehicles because, and you see this in a lot of forums nationwide, and it's a huge topic of discussion. What automobile and truck technicians have to know to work on these vehicles, they're not being paid enough. And so, yes, it is about the pay, but the younger generation, the younger guys, they want other things too that personally for me didn't really make much difference. So they have to have an environment where they feel like they're, again, I'll repeat this, they are acknowledged, they're welcomed, they're wanted. Tooling, I think, is big. If I walked into a fleet, for example, or a garage for that matter, and I saw, they didn't have any tooling, I would really think twice about taking that job. So those are just some of the things I can think of.
I think those are all very important things. And, it's probably you could have a whole discussion on that, on its own. So I think that's just a general place to start. And again, we could talk all day about this, but I
Oh,
wanted to
yeah.
add, yeah, it's a very broad thing and you could go on and on as you obviously know. But I wanted to ask you one more thing, and that comes to training. And, of course, that's, your field. But how can fleets maximize their technician training budget? Because, there's training, but then there's the budget side of it as well. So how do they maximize that?
I was a training coordinator at the Ford dealership. Having worked there at that point, I had worked there about 9 years, and we were a union shop, so we didn't have a large turnover. I knew which technicians to send where, and what I mean by that is there were certain technicians I just knew weren't going to be able to handle certain training classes. Everybody has their own talents. I don't mean that in a negative way. Some people are really good at electricity and electronics. Some people are not really good at electricity and electronics. personally, I think if you're motivated, you can become good at electricity and electronics. It's a tough, and I'm using that as one example. It can be a tough concept for some people to grasp because it's abstract. It's kind of like gravity. You can't see or feel gravity, but if you throw a ball up in the air, you can see the effect gravity has on it when it falls to the floor. And electricity, unless you've gotten shocked, is the same way. You can't really see it. You can measure it with a voltmeter, or you can be shocked. But sometimes that's a little bit difficult to grasp. And again, like I said, I don't mean that in a negative way, but some guys were better suited to different types of work. So I categorized the guys as which guys needed to go to which training so that we didn't waste money sending a guy out and well, besides possibly failing the class, though, to me, if you failed a class, yeah, that's bad, but you may have learned a bunch of stuff in the class, so that's a plus. But if you send the wrong guy to the wrong class and he's not able to grasp it, that's a huge minus. For example, at our dealership, we were a union shop, so the training center was 3 hours away in the East Bay up in San Francisco. It was in Pleasanton, which is eastern suburb, about 20 miles east of Oakland. So by the union contract, the dealer had to pay the guy's salary for the day. We worked hourly because we were union, wasn't flat rate. Another topic. So we were paid our salary, hotel was paid for, rental car was paid for, all food was paid for. And there was no fee for the class because it was a franchise agreement with Ford Motor Company. But so you've lost, let's say you were at a 3-day class, you've lost 3 days of productivity plus all the expense to send the guy up there. My outtake was, again, if the guy learned a few things, it may have been worth it. But if he failed the final, then that you would have to send the guy back up there to take the class again, and that's a huge expense. So categorizing which guys are better suited to which topics, and what I did at the dealer was I came up with a test, and again, I'll use electricity and electronics, for example, where I put some test questions together, and if it was a new guy, for example, and I really didn't know that much about him, I could gauge how qualified he was in that topic and also if he was ready to go to that class. So that's the main thing, is trying to figure out which guys you want to send to which training. My personal feeling is, other than the money, it's never a waste sending somebody to training. I've paid hundreds of dollars out of my own pocket for a class and maybe I only learned 1 or 2 things. To me, that's worth it because you can't quantify that really in a shop environment. I mean, you don't send guy to a training class, and let's just say, for example, that it's taking him 4 hours to complete a job when maybe it would have only taken 1 if he'd been to training. That's a cost that can't be recovered. So I always felt like the guys at the dealership, any of the guys at the dealership were capable of learning anything if they put their mind to it. For some of them, it was a little bit of extra effort, but if they wanted to do it, they could.
I mean, I think that's huge right there, just investing in that, like you said. Um, so for our audience, again, we know this is a huge thing that we talk about technicians all day. But any final thoughts for our audience? Any views maybe into the future of what the future looks like, how to prepare? Just something to end our chat with.
Oh man, the technology is unbelievable right now. I remember in the late 90s being at a Ford training center and they had a poster on the wall with the Lincoln Mark 8 with the tarantula intake, and the engine looked like it'd been shoehorned into the engine compartment and all these wires and sensors. And they had on the poster, it said, "It isn't rocket science, but it's close." And it is really rocket science now. when you consider that they landed on the moon with a 64K computer back in 1969, and now the processing capability we have, I mean, not just in cars, but home appliances even, they're all computerized. I don't think it's ever going away. It's going to continue to become more complex. We're never going to go back because the automakers have so much money invested in research and development. It's a great career if you make the effort to make it a great career. I just look at the stuff coming out on the new vehicles and getting back to the instructor at the General Motors Training Center, you know, you stay trained, it's job security. So that's what I see in the industry. There's so much controversy now about self-driving cars, especially out here in California. You saw what happened in San Francisco a couple of weeks ago where they had a power outage and all the Waymo cars stuck at the intersection. I don't know where that's going. Myself, I prefer to drive the car. Just growing up in Los Angeles, you turned 16, you drove. But I think I'm excited by the technology. I'm excited to see what they come out with. The stuff they come out with is just fascinating. And yes, we all curse and swear at it when it doesn't cooperate. But the technology they're coming out with now is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that. So I would say to everyone watching, there's a lot to look forward to in the future, but stay on top of that training because I
There
imagine you
sure
get
is,
pretty
yeah.
overwhelmed. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're always busy. Every time I talk to you, you're traveling and bouncing around. So it's really nice to sit down and talk with you and, share your insight with our audience and, just have you here.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
And to our audience, if you want to get more insights from Mike, like I said, he has a blog that's on the Government Fleet website, and he's also one of our speakers at GFX. So stay tuned for that. Keep an eye on our website, and we'll see you all next time.